The day was my birthday. At 32 years old, I had it planned for months. A nasty divorce and a severance check from a lost job meant nothing. Nothing to stop this day. I woke out of my parents' basement and hopped in my truck. I had no idea how I was going to make the payment yet. Today was not to worry. All my troubles would soon be over. After several stops and a mile's drive, I pulled into the Cabana Inn. It was a dingy place known for drug overdoses, drunk stumblings, and sheets you wouldn't dare point a blacklight. For me, however, it was perfect. I dropped my supplies off on the cheap nightstand and readied my closet. Bare copper hangers and an iron coat rack stuck in the concrete. I set up my things, leaving the door open to lay on the bed and eat dinner. Burnett's vodka and Fritos and chili cheese. Half of the bottle went into my favorite Steiner from my backpack with Sprite and a squeeze of lemon. It was a drink my best friend and I shared for years. That was before he died of an overdose mixing heroin and meth. If only you could see me now. I laughed to myself, drinking alone in my room. I closed the tacky nightshades, covering the windows in sewn floral patterns and vagaries of a Spanish getaway. Then it was out the door to a setting sun outside. The orange glow glittered over everything in the bitter cold. Snow was black from gas and soot as the whole state stank from the smell of the sugar beet factory miles away. Even in the grim winter, the open air felt nice. On the balcony, I smoked a Lucky Strike in my hoodie and contemplated my life. My wife Denise left me 2 months ago. Apparently, she was never happy. Only settling for me as a thinner man with more hair screwed her at his leisure. A blood test I'd done in secret showed my greatest fear. The boy I raised for 7 years wasn't even mine. Even still, I took her in, forgiving her, doing all I could to be the sole provider, and this was how it ended. The real dad finally settled for her and him, so she went off without me. Back in the arms of the man she always wanted, leaving me to foot the bill. First, I came home to an empty house. Never answered her phone when I called, only gave me the notice from her lawyer. She even had the gall to sue me for child support, unaware I knew her secret. None of that mattered anymore, for today was my birthday, and all would be taken care of. I flicked my cigarette into the street below. I drank more vodka and grabbed my life savings. Only a few thousand, yet it was all I'd need. Grabbing the small rolls of 20s, I stumbled into nightfall. The Cabana had another perk. Mormon towns are known for 2 things: weird liquor laws and strip clubs. Right across the street from where I stayed was the Torch. The dingy wood roof was covered by tacky purple lights and a pair of giant red lips on a sign that held its namesake. I popped a mint in to cover the smell of liquor on my breath as I headed in. A small man who doubled as the DJ took my license, looked me over once to see if I had any creep vibes, and let me in. The place was dark. Ultraviolet and neon lined everything, and the seats were of fake leather in supple reds and purple. Beautiful women in lingerie danced for truckers and cubicle rats alike, all of them standing around, slobbering in awe with dollars in their hands. I sat at a bar that served only soda, ordering a Sprite. As I sat, a woman came on cue and tried to make small talk. She was chubby, with a mole in her face, but her breasts were squished together and oiled on display. She did her best to pretend to find me interesting and asked if I wanted to dance for 20. Any other time I'd have said sure, but I was here for one. It was then I found her on the stage. A gorgeous woman with black hair danced around the pole, her wide hips swaying in lithe curves with a lump of excess weight. With all the grace of a ballerina, she spun around, the body glitter sparkling as she danced. She was perfect. Ignoring the first girl, I found a seat before the dancer and laid a 20 out before her. She crawled over, picking it up with a stride before purring in my ear. "What's your name?" "Michael, what's yours?" The alcohol in her cherry blossom lotion sent my head spinning as I tried to keep my composure. "Giselle," she replied as she rolled on her back, draping her legs around me, pulling me in. "You want to dance, baby?" I gasped out my reply in my arousal. "How about an hour?" She thought for a moment and smiled. "Sure, let me take care of these guys, and I'll see you when I'm done." With that, she slid with grace to the next man, putting down a 5, eager for her attention. I went back to the bar and waited. She talked me up when she was done, just as the one before, now leading me to the private booth. Hour after hour I paid for her time. The saddest thing was her fake kindness was far sweeter than the bitter resentment I got from my wife. The stripper was soft and kind, asking about my day as if she cared. Before Denise left, I would be lucky to get so much as a hello free of scathing comment about how much of a loser I was. I did my best, kept everything paid, I even put in overtime. None of it was enough. Her other man had his own business, with a nicer car and a house which, whenever we fought, she was sure to bring it up. Never outright saying she was cheating on me, just inferring it with passive-aggressive comments, just where I could hear. Finally, I once accused her of cheating in an argument. My wife glared with the cruelest of smiles before saying, "If you weren't so pathetic, I wouldn't have." Now was not the time to think of her. I had a woman far more beautiful in my lap and all the money to keep her there. Even if it was for only that. I must have given her $1,000 before the 4th hour passed. I learned her real name. She was in school to be a nurse and was using this to pay the bills. She had an OnlyFans accruing members, and between the two she'd been quite comfortable. The only reason she stayed in school was so she'd have something to fall on when her beauty faded. The money from her industry running dry. "I won't die in a trailer like my mother," she admitted, the bitterness over it seeping through her tired eyes. I didn't judge her for her choices. I was just thankful she was kind. She didn't sneak insults at me when I told her about my life. Acknowledged my feelings when I vented, even looked for ways to compliment me where she could. Were it not for that where we sat, I would have been in love. When our time was up, I threw my Hail Mary. I fumbled out I had a room across the street and another 1,000 if she'd join me. She thought for a second, shrugged, and gave a nod. I was thrilled. I gave her the room number, headed back, and waited. It wasn't an hour before I heard a knock. She came in, looked me down for signs of a knife or a gun, and stepped inside. I gave her the money, and so the deed was done. It cost me everything I owned, but for that next hour, it was worth it. I didn't think of my wife, my failures, or anything which caused me pain. All there was to be had was sweet skin and ecstasy. When it was over, I thanked her. She smiled, gave me a kiss on the cheek, asking if I was all done. I nodded in my exhaustion, and she was on her way, pausing only with a brief look of horror when she saw what was in my closet. She stepped out, keeping her composure, closing the door behind her. Still I lay there, drunk in the cocktail of oxytocin in my brain from the best sex I'd ever had. As I calmed down, I knew the time had come. I put my pants back on and had a smoke and downed the remainder of my bottle. This would be the happiest I could ever hope to be. It was all downhill from here. I went to the closet and saw what made her recoil. A rope lay in its coil waiting for me. I unbound it from the plastic liner, looping it over the curtain rod to tie a perfect slip knot. A skill I learned from my days in summer camp as a boy. The bottle and sex had me drunk and exhausted, yet now was not the time to falter. I went to my bag, grabbing the last of its contents before flipping on the television. I watched some anime of fighting robots, opening the bottle of Z-Quil in my hand. I stood there in the closet with the rope around my neck, drinking it down till nature did the rest. I remember falling asleep. The room went dark. In that brief moment, there was nothing. Then, as though coming into the middle of a dream, I stood inside my room. All around me lay in a haze of devoid of color. It was flicked and buzzed throughout like white noise on an old TV. I turned around and saw myself unconscious, hanging by the neck. Any sense of panic or dread was gone. It was as though feeling happened to another person. Experience secondhand. Feeling, sensation, The chemicals we derived from sight and sound were gone. Watching as I drew my final breaths, I felt everything I could be. Nothing. I looked at myself, yet there was no body to look at. I would have thought my soul a pair of eyes if I wasn't for what happened later. For now, I willed myself around. It wasn't like walking, more like when you think of something in a dream and you shift there. The camera of your mind's eye sliding as though on rollers. Heading through the door unopened, I shifted to the world outside. Everything was still black and white. The static in my sight stifling as the parking lot shone in another night or day. An overcast twilight with no sun or moon, void of all life and color, leaving only the empty gray. The only word that comes to mind to encapsulate it all was simply dry. Nothing else to do, I wandered. The inn was empty, so was the strip club. The streets between, everything. I felt like the only person on earth with nobody to even be. As time grew on, I traveled further, entering a gas station. Looking around, I couldn't interact with anything. Nothing I could touch, no hands to grasp a chocolate bar or beer. Just your mind's eye to dream within a dream. Stuck between life and death on the outskirts of time, I realized there was nothing left, nothing but to wander these dry places. This went on for hours, or what felt like hours, I wouldn't know. Nothing there to mark the time but nothing. Waiting for nothing was to come. The boredom was torturous, a primal urge to experience anything welling up like pain. An ache for a cigarette that does not exist. No body to experience anything but anxiety and dread. An urge without a name. Only white static devoid of any sound, and that want for something, anything to happen. Eventually it did. Wandering through town square, shimmers of passers-by would flicker in the briefest of moments. I would walk through them as I could catch, and there was a split second it was warm. A glimmer of color to flash inside like the joyful expectation of something about to happen. Then it would evaporate yet again, leaving you in a desert devoid of even sand. The sensation was addicting. With nothing else to feel, I remember being desperate for it. Any sensation for my mind to wrap around. That thirst consuming me as I desperately happened back and forth, wandering throughout this dreadful world, searching for a drop of life. I mentioned I was not alone. Looking up then, I saw what called this place its home. There, in the shadow of an alley, stood the first thing to have a body. Its form looked like scribbling, weaving in and out, making the strangest of geometric shapes. Those shapes collided, warping through each other to form its eyes, its hands, everything twisting in the seizure of lines in the moment. The gears of rotating triangles that made its eyes saw whatever there was of me to see. Its face contorted into a sadistic grin like a predator before a meal, the cacophony of lines in its body shivering in arousal. I turned to run, yet with preternatural speed it was upon me. My senses dropped to the floor as it ripped its way inside of me. I may not have seen a body for me to have, but that did not stop its violation. It ripped and crawled and rolled around within me, the sick sensation of my very being no longer my own, a defilement within my soul, as I now had the ability to feel emotion, those being pain, discomfort, and despair. It radiated everywhere, all my being now shuddering in revulsion. When I no longer had the strength to fight, laying there frozen to experience its torment, it stopped. The demon rose above me, still grinning all the wider with hatred in its twisting form. The clockwork devil spoke without a word. The command was simple as it forced its message to me. Run. In terror, I had done so. I fled as the revulsion dripped from my soul without a body there to scrub, the defilement and shame mingling within me. I ran with no legs. It trotted slow behind me. In the panic as I fled, I came to the horrid realization that this was all there was, a space outside of hell and heaven, devoid of any sensation for this creature to experience but its own sick sadism. Nothing left but to hunt for me for all eternity. Still I ran, no eyes to sob the sorrow shuddering out of me as I was all alone within this place. Hiding in the dark of empty buildings, that creature there behind me wandering to find me yet again. This went on for what could have been days. I would run, it would find me, the nothingness within me would be replaced with the pain of that thing to have its way. It had nothing better to do than hunt and harm me it did. Hiding in the darkness, I turned inside a home, realizing without meaning to, I was standing in my friend's old house, the one who overdosed. In my panic, I must have fled to the one place in the world I would have felt safe. My sorrow now subsided for a hope in the comfort of lost memories. I entered my friend's room, and there before me was a shadow. It shimmered in the light with the smallest hint of gray, a blurred silhouette shaped like another person. The fear that brewed inside me shook as I turned away to run. I was terrified that the demon now had a partner, someone to pass me to like a pipe to share my torment. The shadow raised an arm, however, reaching to touch me gently. In that moment, a flicker of memory occurred, the thought of my friend and I laughing drunk in his bedroom watching television. We would watch some gory horror film, mocking the props and actors, boasting of what we would have done instead. Before the night was over, I'd shake his hand and make plans to meet again. It was Chris. My friend was stuck in here as well. I'll never know for how long, but there he was with me. The shadow person hugged me close, and I felt the briefest bit of warmth mingled with our shared sorrow. When we separated, my friend turned to leave. It had no words to say, yet I knew to follow. We went through the town, the trees and buildings in the empty gray as we wandered ever on. Eventually, we arrived to where he meant to lead, the two of us returning to the parking lot of the Cabana Inn. Only now there was a doorway. It had no walls to prop it up or even a door within, yet in the entrance there was blue. A sky hue with flecks of clouds rolling as time moved into a gentle breeze within. Its peaceful glow stood in stark contrast of the world we were in, its light soaking into the concrete there around it. I could have sobbed in joy, yet there was no time to do so. As I turned, I saw that demon chasing after. Its sadistic grin, like a Cheshire cat, made it in a mix of rage and glee I would never have thought possible. It charged on all fours, tearing towards us like a lion, leaping upon its prey. My best friend pushed me through the doorway. I turned as I fell through, watching that thing leap upon him instead. I woke on a stretcher. An ache racked my body as I choked to life, spitting up a mixture of vomit, charcoal, and blood. Two paramedics high-fived each other and cheered, congratulating themselves before checking my vitals. I learned later that the stripper had a heart of gold, calling the police to warn them of my suicide. By some miracle, the ones who got the call were down the block hunting for drunk drivers. The cops had found me, cut me down, and all this occurred within an hour. I left there with a hospital bill larger than my arm and a pamphlet for mental health services. Now I go to any church that will take me. Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, I don't care. But every day I light a candle for my friend, begging anyone who will listen to pray for his mercy. Maybe you can do so as well. His name is Chris. I spend every moment thankful I'm alive and horrified what is happening to him as we speak.